All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Runners Roundtable, where in season 2, I'm talking to different female run coaches. And today I am joined by Erin Kennedy Dalisay, or should I say Dr. Erin Kennedy Dalisay. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I love speaking to coaches that are multi-hyphenated coaches, and you're one of them with your physical therapy background. But also, I'm really curious to dive deeper into your approach to developing athletes mentally, because I get the feeling
Sure.
that that's a really big component of what you do. Not so much
Yeah.
let's prep the body, get you injury free, but also that mental component. Because as I'm
Yeah.
having these conversations, and even for myself, the longer I'm in this sport, the more I realize that the mind is the hardest thing to train. Like, it really
Yes.
is the hardest thing to train. And I'll give an example of this, because we're talking on a Monday. Mondays are my speed workout days. And last night I realized I didn't have any fuel. Like, I used up all my fuel. I was able to find like one packet of scratch chewies. I can't even tell you, I went to bed last night stressing out over not having enough fuel to do my run.
Mhm.
And, when I woke up this morning, I had this whole conversation with myself of, you got to trust that you ate enough on Sunday, that you fueled well before the run. You've got to trust that I usually eat graham crackers before my runs in the morning. So it's like this whole discussion of, you got to trust that you're going into that run fueled enough, and that the chews that you have are going to be enough to get you through the run. And I had a great run, but it was all of that telling myself, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. So before we get into that aspect of who you are and how you interact with your athletes and even with yourself, tell us your running
Yes.
story.
Um, sure. Wow. I've been running for a really long time. So ever since I was a kid, actually, so I grew up in a family who is all runners. Like my dad's done Boston Marathon a few times. My mom has done a couple marathons and she's training for a half marathon right now. So I was just lucky enough to be born into a family where we did 5Ks. I know not everyone would say that's lucky, but yeah, so 5Ks. And then I was in cross country in middle school and high school. I was never very good, but I actually did my first marathon when I was 16 with my dad. So we did California International Marathon, and that's still one of my favorites that I've ever done. So been a runner for a really long time. And then ever since then, I've done like one marathon a year since then, and just training for things as I want to, and seasons of life. But I got really serious in physical therapy school. Actually, it was really stressful time, so I needed an outlet, and that seems like a really good thing just to kind of like focus my energies on that was not schoolwork. So that's when I got really more serious into training. Like I got a run coach at the time. And yeah, so since then, I've still kept up training, again, seasons of life, but it's always been there, and it's always been something that I can fall back on in harder times or in really good times. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel that running has been such a constant companion through the
Yes.
ups
Yeah.
and downs of life. When I think of, I've been running at the capacity that I'm running for 10 and a half years now. And I'm like, that is a very long relationship to have with anything. So to
Yes.
say that I've been in this sport for a decade is amazing. So for you growing up with that, did you ever feel like there was any pressure with running or pressure to do it? Or has it always been this place of almost like catharsis for you?
Um, like I said, I was never especially talented in running. So I don't think I really took myself that seriously as I was doing it in middle school and high school. So, and especially my first two marathons, it was pressure in the sense of, okay, I have to train so that I can actually complete this distance. But it was always a fun thing to do with my dad. So we went on long runs together, midweek runs. So it was really just a nice bonding experience with the two of us. And I guess in terms of pressure, if I had to really think about it, I don't think I put as much pressure on myself up until right when I was graduating PT school, I think was the height of the pressure. So, probably going through all of that, putting a lot of pressure on myself for exams, getting school done, it seeped over into that. More of those kind of like, I have to get the time that I need, I have to do these runs, being really rigid about everything. And I can't remember. I think I did 3 or 4 marathons in PT school, and each one got a little bit more pressurized. And then at the end, I think it was 2019 Shamrock Marathon. That was when I put the most pressure on myself. And of course, it didn't meet my goal. So it was just this whole cascade of like, oh, I'm not good enough. Like, this is the year I'm graduating school. I didn't meet my time. It was a really hard semester for me. So it was just, I think everything in a big concoction ended up being a lot of pressure. So after that, I've done a lot of work to kind of take that down. So at this point, I wouldn't say I put too much pressure on myself in the running world, maybe not enough, but yeah, I learned my lesson pretty hard. So
Yeah, and I think that's so important to reflect upon, right? Because the more pressure we put on ourselves as runners, the less we perform how we want
right.
to perform,
I
right?
know.
I feel like I'm curious for you if that was I guess, was that a time period where you felt like not good enough as a runner?
I actually, at that time, and still, I was the best that I ever was at running. I was putting in, it was my last internship of physical therapy school. So, like, our third year is all in the field, like clinical rotations. And so that semester, I was putting in, like, and we don't get paid for this. We actually pay to do our rotations, but putting in 12-hour days. I was not eating enough. I barely got water in. I was working in a hospital. My instructor had a lot of pressure on me too. So it was just that. And then I was getting my runs in after work or in the morning. So could just imagine like putting in 6-mile training runs on maybe like this much food, maybe just like a little Tupperware. So yeah, it was a lot of the school stress that was getting to me, but I was performing super well. Like I had the perfect training cycle. And I think it just kind of all collected there at the end. And I missed my time by 2 minutes. So, I mean, it wasn't like I totally bombed it, but yeah, it was just, that's why I am so passionate about the mental side of things. So with that background, it's really helped inform how I treat my own athletes, because after that I just kind of burnt out on running. Like
Mm.
I took some time off, and so yeah, and that's why I was the best that I was then, because after that time period it's all about building back up now. So it was more pressure from just life versus running.
Yeah, it's again, it's like a performing at all levels and trying to
Yeah.
be good and do well. And I can only imagine if school was stressful, running is this
Mm-hmm.
place where you try to have control, at least. And I say
Yeah.
this just purely
Yes.
for myself, where it's like, oh, in my case, it's I have kids, and it's very much I cannot control them like as much as I want to pretend that I can. I can't control their moods. I can't control what they're going through. So I take a lot of that frustration or that lack of power, lack of control into my
Sure.
run, where it's like, okay, can we please just have this one thing go right? And it's so interesting to hear you say of like, you had a great training cycle and then during race day, it just didn't click, where that reminder of everything is cumulative, like everything builds
Right.
upon everything else. So you have this race, that's a turning point for you. What changed, or what have you seen has been your evolution as a runner? Like a tangible, concrete example of what's changed for you since then.
Well, so let me think back because Shamrock happened, and then afterwards I tried to train for some more 5Ks. Like I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll just work on some shorter races at this point. But I was just tired too. So that summer, and I had Chicago, like I had already been signed up for Chicago earlier that year. So I was just kind of dabbling around. I did have a run coach at the time. And so she and I worked on my speed, and nutrition was another big topic that I delved into a lot at the time. So tangibly, I have been approaching my races a lot differently and just being very attuned to, okay, what season of life am I
Mm.
in right now? So, you know, instead of just saying that I can always perform this amount at this race, that's just not going to happen. So, like, I should have kind of recognized that in physical therapy school. It was a really stressful work experience. So, maybe I just need to go easy on myself, and running is going to be something that I keep around, but I'm not going to maybe go for PRs. So, at this period in my life, I'm kind of like mapping out, okay, is it going to be a really stressful work period for me? Is that realistic for me to try to do PRs at the time? And it's a work in progress for sure, but it's something where I really am trying to look at everything that I've got on my plate, and then helping my runners and my athletes to also look at all of the things they have on the plate, because we're one human being. So if one area is taking up a lot of our energy, we really only have so much to expend and it to be a healthy experience. So that's why if I have a little bit less on my plate with work, okay, like now is the time. Like this is my time where I go for those PRs. This is my time where I train really hard because I
Mm.
have the bandwidth. So that's something that I've been looking at a lot more. Just what are the questions I need to ask people to kind of like hear, even if they don't understand, like hear what is going on in their life so that we can kind of plan their training around what they already have.
I love that because it's so important for everybody to know this and to hear this, that not every season is a PR season, right?
Right.
Not every,
Yeah.
like you can do the races, you can do the training, but not every season is going to be a PR season, or not every season is going to be a
Yeah.
season where you work really, really hard. Sometimes the seasons are just base building. Sometimes the seasons are learning how to nail down your nutrition so that you have fun on the long distance. So I really love that
Yeah.
that's something that you're exploring. How did you come into run coaching?
Well, so I did have that run coach, and she and I had a great experience together. I stopped working with her mostly because during COVID, like as that was ramping up, again, a very, for all of us, but a very stressful time. So I took a step back from training, and then later that summer is when I really started, in terms of physical therapy, I really started wanting to treat mostly runners. And so I took a couple courses, I started reading more books and getting more into biomechanics of running and like the nitty gritty. And so in that period of time is when I started reading a lot of research articles on, okay, like why do running injuries actually happen? Can we predict where they're going to happen or at what period it's going to happen? And in all of those studies, it points back to training errors. So, in cumulative load. So, that was really eye-opening for me, where it's like, oh, if we can be on the front side of things, like if we can figure out how to balance all of our factors, we're going to be a lot less likely to get hurt. So if we're looking at things like nutrition, strength training, mental fatigue, and putting that into a training plan, people are going to feel better for one, but also not get sidelined as often. So that's where I was like, oh, like, okay, I need to be a run coach because I need to know all of these factors and how to put it into a training plan. So that's when I decided to take I think you and I have the same
Yeah.
run certification. Yeah, the RRCA. And I was guided, I don't know if you have more info on this, but that one seemed to be more toward like the recreational long distance athlete. So that's why I took that one. And then I started making training plans for like my family. And it was really fun. So I decided to try to take on some actual clients, and to the point now where I think all in all, I've helped 30 people. And I like to keep my people around as much as possible. Uh, it, I don't necessarily have like packages. When I have an athlete, I try to keep them because we build a really good relationship, and I get to learn that much more about them so that we can actually tweak the training plans as necessary. And so it's been a really fun journey. I would say that I weave it into my physical therapy practice a lot too. So when I'm seeing runners who are hurt, it's been so helpful to have my run certification because I'm able to give them like some weekly training plans depending on where they're hurt. So that's been really, really good to have the coaching certification. I don't think I could be doing my running PT practice without it. It's been an integral part of what I'm doing.
Yeah, because you're addressing all of it, right? Like and everything
Yeah.
that you're saying is so much of this holistic view of the person that's
Mm-hmm.
the athlete, right? So like, yes, they may come to you with a running injury, but there's still a human in a body that needs to move, that wants to move. I'm curious, in your experience, what is the most common running related injury that you see?
It's in my experience, plus in the research, it's the front knee pain. So
Mhm.
it's called the patellofemoral pain syndrome. So it's where your kneecap on the very front of your knee, if you went down towards your foot, that tendon right there, that's where people get a lot of pain. And usually, if we're looking at addressing the knee pain itself initially, but then it really does have to do with either hip or foot strength and stability and possibly running gait. So that's the most common thing that we see. Like the knees usually get the short end of the stick in terms of running injuries.
How do you respond to people when they tell you, oh, I don't want to run, or running's not good for your knees, or running's going to destroy my knees? What do you say to that? Because I feel like that is probably the most common thing that we hear. And it's an interesting thing. I try to tell people like, hey, the research is not stating that, right? But you
Mm-hmm.
actually know, like, anatomically, you have a
Yeah.
different understanding of that. What do you tell people when they come to you with that?
So luckily, I haven't got that as much. I think that just the groups that I'm in, they have heard, this is being debunked. So there's a couple different types of knee pain. And I think when people have that idea, they're thinking more like the long-term knee pain, like the osteoarthritis, which happens when people get older, they start to have just generalized joint pain. So I think people are thinking about that in terms of like as they're getting older, they're going to have all these knee problems. So that's a little bit different than what I just described, but the front knee pain. But yeah, you're totally right. So there's a lot of research articles that'll show actually it really helps to build bone and cartilage. So that's, we want to have people do running because it helps build our body because it will respond to whatever we put on it. But if we don't prepare it in the right way, yeah, you're gonna get hurt just like anything else though. So it's not that running is a evil thing for your knees. We have to figure out where your weaknesses lie and address those so that you don't end up with injuries. But again, it's just like anything else. If your body is not prepared for what you're asking it to do, then something's going to happen. So it's like just get prepared for running and then you can prevent a lot of these things.
Yeah, I appreciate that because I always think of myself. And when I first started running, I didn't do a warm up. I didn't do anything. I just went out. Like I didn't know any better. And
most people don't.
yeah. And it's so funny because now, I mean, I feel it. If I don't do a warm up, I feel like the Tin Man where everything just feels really heavy and awkward. And sometimes even after I do my warm up, I still feel heavy and awkward, but at least again, that mental part of me says, oh, but you are at least kind of warmed up. So it's so interesting because we often say, if you want to run, just put your shoes on and go, right? Like that's something that you hear a lot of people say. I would say that as well. And now that I'm older, I realize like, oh, you really shouldn't just put your shoes on and go. Not that you have to do a lot, but if you just spend like 3 to 5 minutes before you go out kind of activating things, then it's a little bit smoother. But that's a hard thing for people to, I feel like, conceptualize or maybe just grasp that, yeah, if you prepare your body for what you're going to do, then it's going to go a little bit smoother. Not that it'll be easier. I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying it's going to be easier. It just will be a little bit smoother. I'm curious with your athletes, how do you get them to embrace that, right? Embrace that, like, okay, yes, you're a runner, you're doing the running thing, but let's take the time. And I'm going to assume that strength training is something that's really important to you as a coach with your athletes, even for yourself. Mobility stuff is probably important as well. How do you get your athletes to buy into doing those things as well?
Yeah, so people are not going to do anything they don't think is valuable. So it's all about, or if there's too much for them to have to focus on. So usually how I first approach it is ask them questions that help them get to their own conclusions because and that's the same for physical therapy too, really for anything, is people are not going to respond as well to information being shoved at them as well as they would respond to something that's their own idea. So having to ask questions that help people kind of like get there on their own is one, how you get people to get better in physical therapy. But two, just for people, they don't want to be told what to, well, I shouldn't say that, but people generally will do things if they think it's worth their time. So all that to say is we'll take it one step at a time. So if I just start working with someone, am I going to give them a whole strength routine, a mobility routine, plus their running, plus maybe like the mental exercises that I'll give them and breathing techniques? Like, no, we're going to take it in stages. What's the most important thing for you right now? And how can we make a habit of that? And then we start to layer on these other foundations. So usually if people feel overwhelmed or if they don't understand the value of something, they're just not gonna do it. So, and that's fair. I mean, I wouldn't do it either. So it's first getting them to understand why it's important and then focusing on what they need the most in that moment.
Yeah, I love that because it is, I come back to something I always say, right? Your run coach is more than a training plan, and that your training plan is a living and breathing thing. And here, when I'm hearing you speak, it's you're weaving things together. It's like, all right, you come to me for running, but we'll focus on that. Like we'll build you a training plan on running, and then we're going to introduce all these other things slowly, weaving other things in. So if someone is interested in working with you, what is that initial contact like? And then how do you determine whether someone's a good fit for you and you're a good fit for them?
So usually I'll do consult calls and first just getting to know that person and how what their goals are for one, and if I'm someone who's the best fit for them in terms of their actual goals. So I like best to work with people training for like half and full marathons. That's my own experience, and I've dealt with that a lot in my practice. So that's my preference. I have had a lot of people come to me like postpartum, and that's a good area for me too. And so first off, okay, what are your goals? Am I the best equipped to help you with these specific goals? And then secondly, I also really look for people who are in it for the long haul. Just how we've talked about this already, but like how I approach things is very much like broadband, and I am weaving things in as we work together over a period of time. So if someone were to come to me and say like, hey, Erin, I've never been a runner. All I want to do is run the Boston Marathon and then I'm done. I probably wouldn't be as jazzed about that because like I really do like to work with people who are in it for the lifestyle. So that's more of my preference. Not that I don't think that I could help that person to get that goal, but that person might not respond as well to how I approach running as someone who does understand all of these complexities. So, and not to say that's a bad goal or people shouldn't do that. But if they just have like one goal race and they just want to do it so they can say they did it, again, not a bad thing as long as they don't get hurt. But that's maybe not, we're not going to click as well because I am not someone who's going to push someone just for the sake of a time. So, and again, my experience, I did that. I found out how that works. It wasn't the best for me, at least, and most people I talk to. So that's usually what I'll listen for. And then too, just like if we have good conversation, if we can talk to each other well, if that person is open to exploring some of these other areas, then usually that's the type of client that I'll go for.
Yeah, I love that because this is something with all these conversations I've been reflecting so much on the importance of having a long lasting relationship because you as a coach gather so much information from someone when you're coaching them through a cycle that's focused on a race, through recovery, through base building, through just running to keep life like running just as a part of life versus running for anything. There's so much information to be gathered. And it's also really helpful for the runner as well to kind of know that they're going to be supported through all these different phases in a way that's one, it's going to challenge them physically because they're still running, but it's also going to be done in a way that keeps them hopefully injury free and really understanding that running is a lifestyle choice that you make. And I agree with you. And it's funny because it's as well, I've been thinking about this a lot lately where I was like, man, I think at this point, I personally wouldn't want to train someone who just says, I just want to train for this full marathon. I'm not a runner and I just want to do it and I'm done. I think for me, I would be like, that's wonderful. I'm really excited for you. I will cheer you on, but I'm not the person for you because
Mhm.
one, the demands of marathon training are so intense that unless you're committed to running in general, I feel like it's really hard to commit to training for the distance.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
so I hear you on that. And I mean, and even then I'm like, oh, yeah, and not to say anything against if a person can do it and they can do it, it's wonderful. For me, it's just after having gone through so many marathon experiences myself, I'm like, yeah, to go from 0 to marathon, that is a lot on the body, on the mind, on the lifestyle. It's just a lot. And again, not to say that I would not support someone like that, but just that I feel very similar to you, where it's like maybe I'm not the best person to necessarily coach through that. So I love that you know that about yourself.
Yeah, and I think too, like when things go wrong, it's when there's expectation not being met. So if someone does have just one marathon or one race goal, but I'm thinking about how to make them a whole happy person, then our expectations are off. So we're neither of us are going to be happy with how that training plan goes. So finding someone who's more geared toward, okay, this is how you do this, I think they would just be more successful and less frustrated. So,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. Your athletes, do you give them their training plans? And what time chunks do you give it to them?
It depends on the person, but I use VDOT. So I will usually sketch out. So like if someone's training for a half marathon, so I'll put their half on the schedule and then it's hidden, but like I'll reverse engineer the mileage that I want them to do. And then usually I'll publish him in like 2 to 3 weeks
Mhm.
chunks. And because like you're a coach, so you know the plan never actually is done. If you make a whole complete plan for that half marathon, it's not going to happen. So you have to be flexible with what life situation they're doing. Maybe they really bonked a workout, or maybe a week was just not theirs. So we have to adjust the training schedule as we go. But usually I'll sketch out like the mileage that I'll want them to do. And then if they have a pace goal, like what key runs I might have them do along the way to test the fitness. But yeah, usually I'll make them for 2 to 3 week increments so that they can see it. But
Yeah, I love that because it's for every athlete is different in terms of how they see it. And I definitely
right.
approach training plans very similarly, where I like to sketch it out based on mileage. And then I'll go back and say, like, okay, so if this is our speed day, what are some of the speed workouts we can do there? And I find that
Yeah.
that's probably one of the funnest parts about
Yeah.
being a
Mm-hmm.
run coach is when you're piecing that particular puzzle together for your
Yes.
athlete. How would you describe your coaching style?
Well, so I think again the holistic part of it, but usually usually I'll first go after, okay, do we have a really good base? And then that can help me decide based off a time trial to, okay, what
Mhm.
are we actually looking for? Um, but you know, I've read a lot of the different books like Galloway, Jack Daniels, like all of those concepts. So when it comes to an individual person, it's like, oh, okay, well, Galloway method might be best for this person in this training cycle. Or like maybe we should bring in a little bit of like Jack Daniels to this. Or like, so just trying to take all of those types of methodologies and then gear it toward that person is a
Mhm.
really fun exercise for me. So no one's training cycle is the same. So I have one athlete right now who just thrives on high mileage, which is not something I would give to everyone. So it's very individualized and it's a very mental exercise, but I don't have any training templates. Like I don't, maybe I maybe I should, but I don't because it just doesn't work. Um, everyone is so different. And that's one thing that I love about coaching too, because as a physical therapist, we don't always get to see our people at their peak performance. So usually, at least in my first couple of years of practice, you work with someone until the point where they're at like baseline, and then you have to let them go. So being able to take someone to not injured state, but then go beyond is really, really fun for me. So it is very rewarding. So I suppose my coaching style is keeping that individualized aspect to it and being able to kind of like meet that person in their season of life, what they need to focus on. I have my little pillars sheet. So I made a little worksheet for my athletes that goes through like, okay, for this training cycle, make 1 to 2 goals for sleep, running, strength training, nutrition, and then social / stress management. So that's something that I'll have them fill out before every major cycle so that we're kind of like hitting all of those goals, but making sure to prioritize 1 or 2. But yeah.
That makes me so happy. That just makes me so, so happy because I always talk about the context and understanding context. And no one is a vacuum. No one lives in a vacuum. So the fact that you get people to sit back and think about what's the sleep, running, strength, nutrition, social, like what goals do I have in these areas? I feel like one, it's incredibly helpful in general. Everyone should do that. Regardless of what you're doing, everyone should kind of sit back and look at that. But I think that's also so helpful when it comes to race planning and training planning. Because like you said, if you're in a season of life, well, I'll give an example of like accountants, right? Like if you're an accountant and
tax season,
season, right? If you already know that social stress, that work stress is going to be high, then this maybe is not your season for training for a marathon, right? Like if you're going to be working so late that you're barely getting 6 hours of sleep at night. So I love that because it's oftentimes we think that, oh, I want to do this race and that's my goal. I'm just going to go do it. And we don't really think about everything else that goes into that. So the fact that you have your athletes map that out for themselves and even determine some of the goals, because if I look at this and I'm thinking about that, thinking about these different pillars that you have, number one, I'm looking at sleep. And I'm like even last night, I went to bed at 9:30. I wish I could have gone to bed earlier, but again, I have kids and sometimes I have a lot of difficulty in going to bed knowing that they're still awake. But that is something that as I'm looking ahead with marathon training, it is very present for me of, am I going to get enough sleep? If I don't get enough sleep at night, is there anywhere in my day where I can get a nap in or something? Or can I lay down? Or can I do something that's a little more restful? So I love that you have them go through this because it really drives home, hopefully, for your athletes, the fact that the running isn't the only thing that's going to demand time, energy, emotion in their lives. How does this work in practice? Are your athletes usually like, yeah, let's do this, let's sit and think about it? Or do you find that sometimes there's some resistance to taking a look at these aspects in their lives?
So far, it's gone really smoothly. That's why I say, like, when I match with someone, I make sure that we're gonna have the same goals. So I haven't had much resistance to it because I've made sure that my athletes and I pair well together. You would be so surprised at what comes back. I love it. I love to read their training pillars. So it's because, like, as a coach, if they don't tell us, we don't know what's going on in their life. So being able to see that mapped out for them and hear that, okay, maybe that social component is more important to them right now. Like I wouldn't have known that otherwise. So that only helps me gear what I do to that person. So it is amazing. I love it. And also, I don't know if we've talked, but I'm doing the mental running coaching too. So I paired with Amanda, who's a social worker or licensed clinical social worker and a run coach. So
Mm.
she's like a licensed therapist. And so she and I have started making training plans for a couple athletes. And it's amazing. It really, really is. Like the questions that she asks and then what they respond back with. I wouldn't have known as much about these people as I did before. And we're able to do a lot of little tweaks to their training plan to help them succeed. So, like for one person, for instance, she learned that maybe he has some characteristics of ADHD. Again, I probably wouldn't have picked up on this. And then it's really hard for him to take rest days. Like he really just doesn't like that. So it's not a resistance because of any other reason, that he just physically doesn't feel good taking a rest day. So instead, I just put in a little yoga routine for him that was really gentle and he could do something and feel accomplished and not add that extra load to his training plan. So doing little things like that has been so rewarding. And I think people have been getting a lot out of it because they bring it over into their real life too, or like their day-to-day life
Yeah.
too. So they're able to take all of the concepts that we're teaching them with like balancing food, nutrition, sleep, and they're able to help that in their day-to-day routine. Like to me, that's success because running is great and everything, but when I look at the lifespan of a human being, especially toward the end, like the people who are the most successful and living the best in their like 80s and 90s are the people who had balance and had strength, and they had all of these factors kind of like figured out along the way, and they are thriving. Like I have some 80-year-old patients right now who are as fit as some of the 20-year-old people I see. So it
Oh no. Hold 1 second. The internet. Let's give it a moment. Can you hear
Stephanie,
me? Can you hear me?
I can see you now. I can't hear
Okay.
you.
I was like, all
Yeah.
right.
Oh,
So
okay.
the internet decided to take a little pause. But
Oh
what
no.
you were saying, the last I caught of what you were saying was that you have people who are in their 80s and it's those people who were able to balance.
Yeah, so I have the people who stayed consistent in like taking care of themselves physically, getting enough sleep. Those were the people who were the most successful and they're making the most out of their life at this stage. So yeah,
Mm.
it's been really cool to help train people across their lifespan.
That's amazing. Let's see. Did I freeze again? Oh, the adventures of Stephanie and her internet are back. Let's give it a moment. Everyone, if you're there, just hang out. Okay. Let's hold for a few. All right.
Hi.
Well, hi again. We'll see how the internet works out here. Uh,
Yeah.
for y'all that are listening, again, this is real life. This is real life Stephanie's adventures with the internet, where it crashed and then it came back. Uh,
Yeah,
but we're here. We're here now. So
we're
I
here.
had a question for you before I dive into the mental aspect of things. Um, can you see me? Oh, the internet. The internet is always so much fun. All right, y'all, I'm going to restart my internet. Please hold. Can you see me?
Hi. Yes.
Okay, well,
Hi.
hi again. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for your patience with me with the internet. Let's see if it holds
Sure.
tight.
Fingers crossed.
Oh, it's so annoying. It is so annoying. All right, before oh my gosh, see, it's a Monday. It's a Monday. It's a
I
Monday.
know. It's okay.
Okay, the question I had for you before we kind of get into, because I do want to dive into that mental side of things, is if you had to describe your coaching philosophy in one sentence, what would it be?
Train for the season you're in.
Oh,
So as we've kind of talked about all of the seasons that go on with training, I think that's usually where I'll derive all my training style from.
yes. Can you see me? Hello, hello, hello. Okay, friends. Truly restarting. I'll be back.